Welcome back. GDP growth 5.9%. At least that what is Jibran Qureishi is saying. So what? What does this mean, and where is this growth going to be actually felt? In other words, Jibran, where do we expect to see this productivity? And our graphics team can put up the chart number 2 just to explain what is happening in the formal and the informal sector. We have it up there. Maybe you can walk us through your tenets on this.
So if you look at the economic survey for not just last year, but 4 or 5 years before that as well, new jobs being created are predominantly, in fact, 90% of new jobs being created are coming from the informal sector. So we're not creating enough formal sector jobs, which is probably also resulting in the tax revenue deficiencies for our authorities. But of course, this is not just a Kenya isolated problem, it's an Africa problem as well. But I'm glad you mentioned productivity, because that is probably the single biggest challenge that we have. Because if you look at the composition of growth in the better part of the last decade in Kenya, it's services driven. So the government, obviously decided and were adamant that they want to boost investment in infrastructure through foreign capital, because we had weak domestic savings. That's why our debt service ratios and debt to GDP has gone up.
Yes.
But what you saw is that the construction sector grew. You saw the investments in rail, the investments in road, the investments in
It's really
power.
government-led expenditure
exactly.
that is driving investment.
Public sector driven, but of course there was financial services that did well and the telecommunication sector that did well. But of course, sectors where we should be employing a lot of people, or we should be looking to relentlessly increase productivity, is agriculture and manufacturing.
And it's not growing. Actually, from your charts, I don't know if we have this up there, the growth is actually coming through construction, actually, and education. So when we say that the bulk of the people in Nairobi are employed in the informal sector, which informal sectors, which business opportunities are this that are coming up in the informal sectors that are able to absorb all these people?
I mean, that's difficult to tell, but according to data, it's mainly retail and wholesale trade. So it's general commerce. But of course, the informal sector is very misunderstood as well. We wrongly believe that the informal sector is poor and maybe not productive.
It's not.
Exactly.
Actually, it's not.
And probably that's why banks are not willing to lend to the informal sector as well. But of course, when you're unregistered, that's the concern that commercial banks would have. But as you become registered, as you formalize, then
then it becomes easier. I like the point you brought out on e-commerce, because we have seen an onset of jobs with people who are doing delivery. So I can order my food on Jumia or on Uber Eats, but it's created a lot more jobs for the people on on a boda, and they can bring the food, or I can get a boda on Uber and move from point A to B. But then these people are not in a formal cluster, so it's very hard to identify them.
Agreed.
But the question on that is this. Earlier today, we had a conversation with an ex-bank, and he said the issue with our banks not giving credit to some of these sectors is because they don't understand how to define a credit product for this informal sector. Because for instance, Jibran, if I do 10 deliveries in a day, and these people are up from 6 till 6 in the evening or even midnight. They probably do 20, 30 deliveries in a day. They probably take home 1,000 to 3,000 in a day. And then there are good days, there are bad days. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, high-end day. And all of this is actually on M-Pesa, but then the bank doesn't see that information. So the question is, even as people are extending or refusing to extend credit, is the issue here product design? And could there be money that's flowing in the informal sector that we are not getting visibility of, so that when we are saying we can't feel the growth, there are people, a different set of people who are actually experiencing growth?
I think, a very valid point that you make. But traditionally, the problem has been perceived to be one of information asymmetry.
Okay.
So, no excuse, because as you rightly say, we are a very tech-driven and very innovative society.
Yes.
So it is high time for commercial banks to form those synergies with companies that have that level of data.
Okay.
And as you get that data, you empower yourself to be able to be comfortable to price risk for that informal sector.
Fantastic.
But the other thing that you mentioned is very important, is the jobs that are being created in this sort of innovative sector, specifically for the youth. But unfortunately, because again, back to the fiscal position, I don't want to take it back all the time there, but again, back to the fiscal position, we tend to see that because authorities are under pressure to boost revenues, they start looking for the golden goose sectors or the golden goose areas.
All
So you go for the areas that are actually generating the most revenue, because you know that's the easiest way to sort of reduce your deficit. But in that process, we are seeing innovation getting
Innovation
hampered.
is a key thing.
Yeah.
All right, hold on to that thought. We take a quick break for our advertisers. We'll see you in a few seconds.